Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. Okay, let's see how everybody's characters are going.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is my sketch for my project, the game project coming up. After last week's class and hearing what everybody was talking about and how they were doing theirs, I kind of went through over the weekend and like revisited it. I won't go into too much detail because of the video, but his name is Mordecai now. He was a wizard that passed, and then somebody botched the resurrection spell, which that's why he's missing his flesh because that was part of the resurrection that was missed. But here's a front view that I sketched out, real quick, and a side view. I used Modeler to make him because the way that I wanted to go about it was easier in Modeler than it would be in Blender. Because in Modeler, there's not a lot of tab and going back and forth and maybe miss something and have to go back and fix it. It's all done right then and there. And then you can join everything just like you can in Blender. I did separate these all out, when I was making them, and I haven't completely joined them. Making the pelvis was pretty fun. I think it actually turned out very well. I brought out a picture, like a reference on my phone, and then kind of modeled it through here using a cylinder of all things, and then kind of cut it in half on top and bottom to get the displacement here. And then just kind of mirrored it and shaped it out. But I think he looks pretty good overall. I did change up his clavicles and his shoulder blades. Made him look more defined and like more like a shoulder blade instead of just like an oval like wing. But I did bring him into Blender OH. If you go to export and go export full scene, you get to this, which grabs everything in the scene, and then you can do all your computations and everything, how Casey showed us. But I did bring him into Blender. So here he is. Made him about the size of a box, a little bit taller. For the poly count, I think I went down to like 6,500. So it's not as dense as a 6,000, 60,000. And it's a little bit more manageable. His teeth did get a little mushed and messed up. I already did the modifier, the mirror. But yeah, I think he came out pretty good overall. Messed up teeth kind of add a little bit to his like nature of bones, but he still got his fingers and his toes. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. But can't wait to start animating and putting like the actual bones, pun intended, into the body, so we can start making them walk around and move.
Is it a pun or a coincidence in this case?
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So that's my presentation. So thanks.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, on Monday we used it as an example there for the skull, fixing an issue with the skull when we brought it in, and then symmetrizing, whatever the word is there.
Hey, good morning.
Symmetrification of the mesh. Yeah, that looks really good. It's very cartoony. The
Hey, good morning.
things that just stick out here to maybe make some quick adjustments on the proportions on the legs seem a little like the thigh bone is just a lot longer than the.
When I brought it into Blender, it kind of smushed it together. So there, that where the kneecap is, it is a little bit more separated. But yeah, the thighs are a little bit longer than the lower leg bones.
Yeah, and then also putting in the a little bit of bend in the knee is going to make things a little bit easier once we get to weighting the mesh to the bones and everything, or the bones to the bones in this case. And then, yeah, the because of the nature of the way the remesh happens coming out of Modeler, we lost some of the detail on the teeth. I mean, that would be a pretty easy thing to replace there in terms of like.
I was thinking about like some cylinders or something, or like some squares, and kind of make them like block them back out and put them back.
Yeah, so the to keep everything quad based here to just get a tooth, I would do yeah, the subdivided cube. So just coming in here and putting a subdivision surface on the cube, that's going to round it out. If you put a bevel on first, it'll keep it more. Yeah, and so this kind of controls how square it would be, and then that's probably, especially once you do shade smooth enough, and then you could sort of get your tooth-like proportions, and then just convert this to mesh, and then you have some teeth that you can place before weighting the mesh so that they would look more have enough resolution there.
So, and I've been noticing that you've been doing that. Like when you convert to mesh and the auto adds the modifiers, is that the same as just adding the modifier from the tab, from the second window, like the modifier window? Because there's a drop down where you just says apply to.
Yeah, apply modifier is the same as convert to mesh. Okay. Yeah. So those two are the same. The one that's categorically different is the one that's in the toolkit, right? Because this does some extra stuff in terms of the, if you run those and then you get results that make it not look like what it looked like before, then that's when you want to use the instant apply modifiers, because that's going to convert those real world units so that you don't get any visual change when you apply the modifiers, right? But in this case, yeah, unnecessary in that case. So, yeah, the only other thing I can think of here is like, perhaps, these will be in the tooth at that, or in the skull, and so, maybe you don't need the faces on top. You could just sort of get rid of the top of this, but that's, pretty minor amount of difference. Okay, cool. Yeah, you're on the right track there. The bent knees, one major thing there. And then let's look at a few other things there. Once we check out everybody's, we're gonna look at a couple other mesh cleanup techniques and taking it, getting the character mesh cleanup, UV unwrap, and paint. So we'll talk a little bit more about Substance Painter.
Hey, this is Jack with ABC 200, and we're going to be taking a look at the character concept sketches and the model that we did for this week. So yeah. This is the concept sketch that I came up with. Made a bit of a pivot on my game. It's still on a submarine and everything, but it takes place like in the 60s kind of, and so I'm trying to do this like older 60s style sailor uniform, like for the Navy. So yeah, that's why he's got this hat on and stuff, and he's got this little bandana going on. These are some of the pictures that I used as like inspiration for the character as well. So I really took inspiration from this picture I found. But yeah, both of these are like very, like 60s sailor uniforms. So yeah, those are my concept sketches. Yeah, I'm not sure if the proportions are all there. His legs might be too long. So yeah, this is what I got right now. Very simple, and I'm also going for like a PlayStation 1 style graphics. So I'm not sure how much else I will like be adding to this, honestly. Like definitely need shoes. That's definitely a thing he needs. But I feel like most everything else is going to be from like texturing. So yeah, and so this is my attempt at kind of remaking that collar and the ribbon. I'm not sure. I mean, this is kind of like high poly. I don't know, for like what it is. I don't know. This camera is going to be from the back, something like pretty close over the shoulder. So I'm not sure, like, yeah. And so yeah, I'm just trying to get the idea of like a 60s sailor, like a teenager dude who doesn't really know what he's doing. So this is the full wireframe view now. I think it's pretty low poly. Yeah, some challenges I faced was definitely just trying to have the right like extrusions in the right places in order to get body parts coming out where they should be. I'm just unsure if I should take it a bit further. I mean, I definitely want to add like something unique or interesting on the back. I don't know if that's going to be in the modeling or in the texturing, but just something that's interesting so that when you're playing behind the shoulder like this, it's more interesting back here. So I'm not sure what that could be. Oh, I just realized it doesn't have ears. So I guess I could add some ears. That's going to be it. Thank you for watching, and bye.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Okay, great.
This is
So
my
what would
sketch
PlayStation
for
1
my
style
project, the
game
game project.
that this would be in the style of?
I guess I didn't have anything specific in mind. That's just like lower poly. I don't know.
Probably like how Tekken used to be, all blocky.
Yeah. Okay. So this is all lower poly, but still, we have enough rounding going around a lot of these characters. Yeah, and at this point, a lot of our texturing and or a lot of the face is going to be completely in the texture, depending on the exact implementation. But yeah, we always remember this version of Chewbacca. That's the one I think of. I think of Chewbacca. Yeah, and so we'll come back.
Hey, this is Jack with ABC.
You sent me the blend file for this? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so you got the right, it has to be, in order to be reasonably rigged, it's got to be higher poly than that. So yeah, like we can have it be many more polys than that and not run into any issues there, regardless of what you do stylistically with it. And so, yeah, in order for it to read even as that kind of thing, the limbs themselves need to be rounded. But you did keep everything very quad-based, and so using the sub-D surface to round out the base of it there, I think should not be too crazy. And then we'll look at another remesh and then smoothing technique there, but we'll use yours as an example too. But yeah, that seems good. And so the only thing there is that right, it's going to be on this, still a dark submarine that we're on. Yeah. Okay, and the character's uniform is going to be the dark navy uniform, and so like it seems like maybe there might be some visual contrast issues there. I mean, yeah, maybe there's like a white version of that uniform, I believe, as well. Yeah, that might be something to consider there in terms of being able to see the character in the environment, depending on how dark said environment is going to be. Yeah. So 2 things to consider. Yeah, but good blockout there, and then yeah, the what you did with the kerchief, because that sticks out and affects the silhouette of the character, that that makes sense there. So, and everything looked like pretty you're pretty specific and controlled in making sure that everything was a quad, and so that makes it much easier to smooth things out later on using the sub-D surface. So we'll look at that. All right, Mr. Peppermint.
Hi everybody. So
How much soundboard are we going to have in this?
Not a lot in this one. It's more in the other classes.
Okay.
here is my character. This is Mr. Peppermint. We already kind of saw him, but just to quickly explain, he's a mafia guy. His shoes were stolen from him, and that's what you're trying to do. And I know in this sketch he has his shoes on, but let me show you his fully modeled look. Boom. So, here he is. I made this in Blender. I decided to go with Blender. Obviously, you can see here, he's got his socks. He's only wearing his nice socks. Now, if I wanted to, I can turn on his shoes because I also modeled his shoes. And I think I'll use the shoes later as a collectible, so it's nice that I actually modeled that. But yeah, here he is. I followed a lot of that one YouTube video you linked in the assignment. That's why this is so colorful. I also did that like he did in his. So yeah, I used a lot of, I would make a cube and then I'd add.
Why is that colorful? What is it showing you?
I don't know. But no, in the tutorial, he was like, okay, here's how you can make your thing look like this in the matcap or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Mocap?
Matcap.
And I liked how it looked. So I was like, okay.
These are world space normals, right? And so it's showing us the color is which direction the faces are pointed in. Okay, and so you can see this to some extent here. Is this going to be world or? Right, and so the colors equate to this, and this, the red, green, and the blue, right? And so that's what that's telling us there. It's not just nice colors for the sake of them being nice colors, right? It's the color coding of the direction that the normal, right? And so the normal, you want to envision it as this line that points out 90 degrees from every plane. That's the normal angle. And it's used in, a bunch of the shading calculations in terms of like the light bouncing off of that face, which is why, we haven't talked about this much here, but why it's mostly better when quads are planar, meaning that all 4 points can be connected, being passed through a plane or connected on a plane, as opposed to having one of them be dramatically unplanar, right? So just to illustrate this again, here's a plane. This plane is planar since all 4 points sit on the XY plane. And if I were to grab any of the points and move them, now this plane is non-planar, right? Now these 3 points sit on the XY plane and this one does not. And so now, what about the normal angle? Not so easy to calculate, right? In fact, we're just sort of negotiating about how one would figure such a thing out, right? Because now these are not planar. Having a little bit of this is fine and inevitable. Like the point of this is not that every plane in your mesh should be perfectly planar. It's impossible to make any sort of organic shape that's going to do that. The point is that you don't want massively non-planar quads, usually quads, in your project, right? And so this could be partially fixed. I mean, the easiest fix here is to simply turn this into 2 tris there, and now this one has a very distinct, clear normal angle, and this one has a very distinct normal angle, right? You can't have a non-planar tri. That's not a thing. Any 3 points in space form a flat triangle that's planar, right? It's when we have 4 points for quads that this becomes an issue. And the other underlying truth with computer graphics to be aware of here is that when the quads get to the GPU, they all get triangulated before they get rendered. And so this kind of, even though we're not doing this for other reasons, like the quads will deform in a way that's more elegant than the tris when we're animating them or deforming them. When it comes time to render them, they all get divided down into these triangles. So that's what that's showing us.
The subdivision surface to it, and I would just do that, and then a lot of it was just scaling along different axes. Like if I wanted to, I need to make like if I wanted to make this, this needs to be bigger up here, I would do like, do that. Like I did that a lot, that kind of thing. I don't really have like any questions about it. It was kind of an interesting process. It was a little hard. Some things were harder than others, especially like there's got to be an easier way to curve this along the face, because I did this meticulously. I went in and moved it. I'm sure there's a better way. I would love to know. Same with like down here with the tie. And also I'm just curious, like, is this a good amount of vertices for this? Because when looking at it from the top or side, you can kind of see the different, you can see it's a little, faceted. But if I add that one more up, it looks much nicer. But I'm trying to conserve vertices, so if you don't think that's a big deal, I will make it bigger. But I'm just curious. Yeah, and that's honestly, that's kind of it. I'm really happy with how this is looking, though. I still got to add the textures and substance painter, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. And yeah, you did a really good job of communicating socks versus shoes here, like the little wrinkle at the end, even without any textures and everything else works. You did a really good job interpreting the shape. It really reads there. The only issue we'll look at here is the arm, because this is all one. This needs to be subdivided here. And so
I don't know why it doesn't. I swear it was. I mean, you'll see in the Blender file.
Yeah. No, just the just the arm, the bodies and the legs, and I think the legs. I didn't quite look, but here, we just need some more subdivisions. Because remember, even once you add the bones, a single face is not going to bend, right? This is a fundamental concept of modeling and then rigging and everything else, right? A single face will not bend, right? And so, or bent, it will do neither of those things. And so in order to create curvature of any kind, you need to have some subdivision happening. And the subdivision surface, if these characters were just staying in Blender, having it all be quads and then deciding later on, even on a per shot basis, how much smoothing we needed for the silhouette, right? So if you move into a close-up, maybe you crank the silhouette up, the subdivision surface up to 3, right? Or something like that. Whereas in a wide shot, this would be fine. In the game, we can't do that in the same way. There's usually not that kind of like levels of detail on like the main character of the game, like some of the background elements perhaps. But that sort of dynamic subdividing in the same way with the subdivision surface is not. There's no subdivision surface modifier in Unity on purpose, right? That's not like it's coming in Unity 7, right? Like it's not something you want to have the computer calculating every frame, is like continuing to subdivide the mesh. You would want to have it's much, much, much cheaper just to have a denser mesh that's just consistent frame to frame versus recalculating the subdivisions every frame. Cool. Okay, we'll look at the arm thing here and fix that and get this guy UV unwrapped there. But so you just moved the points to get the eyes where you wanted them, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I tried using the deform modifier, I think.
The deform.
The simple deform or something. But it wouldn't work. It had like bend.
Oh, that one, yeah. another option there would be shrink wrap, which kind of does exactly what it says. Shrink wrap something to some other shape. And so on this case, the cube going to this sphere. And so you have the shrink wrap is on the cube. The icososphere will be the target. And so it smushes it to the surface there. And there'd be some options here, right? So it completely collapses this. And so in this case, let's look at some other ideas. What if it wasn't a cube? I go tab in, scale this down, bring this up. Let's rotate it. There we go. Tab, scale. Make sure our origin point is okay. Okay. So same thing, shrink wrap onto the icososphere. So this has it on there. When it's only 4 points, again, it's one plane, one face, not really bending. It's just each point is kind of being snapped to the surface. Whereas if we gave it more resolution, it fits the surface more. You could then do something like the solidify. And if this is being calculated afterwards, it comes out of there. There's the offset, which is how close we are to the surface there, right? So this sort of offsets it. But now if I were to grab this and just sort of G move it, you see it's like along the surface there of the icososphere. And then subdivision surface starts to give me, a starting point here, right? In that I would then maybe not subdivide this quite as much, but I have something that's like along the contour of whatever I'd want to have it be on, and then convert to mesh and, tweak my points from that point forward, right? But what you did was fine. Like that always moving, coming in and grabbing individual points always works, right? There's all sorts of other procedural ways to do things, but you have just one. In your case, you're probably mirroring it, so you just have one eye to do, right? And so the amount of time it takes to sort of move the points around versus the amount of time it may take to figure out some other procedural workflow doesn't make sense a lot of times, right? Now, if you had to make 700 eyes, well, then it makes, then it's important to try and figure that out, right? But understanding if you understand how the direct manipulation part works, then figuring out the procedural part of it is just like, well, what steps did I go through directly? And then is there a tool that kind of does those steps? Cool. Awesome. Looks really cool. Landon.
Hello, so I'll show basically like the concept sketches of my character and the model of it. I start in Blender, start with the sketches here. My character, who I introduced in my game design document last week, named Buggle. It's the front views, side views, and I will use those colors for...
Buckle like belt buckle?
I just thought of the name because it looks suitable for like that character, the design of the character.
Yeah, I mean, I thought belt buckle right away.
And
That's
for
a good
all
name.
the parts. Alright, that's my character I plan to make, and I started it in Blender, so show what I got so far for the model. Show it from different angles. Right there's is yeah, and of course I think this head body part is good, and so are the antennas, but I still gotta, these are arms and legs are blocked out, but I still gotta like finish them for like, and then I also want to smooth out like these gloved hands, and also the nose, as you can probably tell. They'll also have to figure out the best way to make eyes and a mouth for a character, like I showed in my drawings, like that. Of course, for some of these things, for multiple of these things, I plan to go look back at some of the lectures on the modeling things in Blender. So, yeah, of course, yeah, it is a little bit challenging of remembering all the tools and all the tips and shortcuts, all the things for modeling, like in Blender. Like it's very much just still a lot to figure out, but just by doing this, I learned multiple things about Blender. So yeah, and yeah, so here's what I got for my character blocked out. I think that's all I have to say. And I got stuff to just, this is very much just a start. And this is a pretty simple character, but yeah, of course, just got to do some work here. Of course, add textures and yeah.
Cool. Okay, that's good. This will be a good example for us to do, to smush everything together, just half of it, and remesh it. I mean, the way your character is set up, it seems like doing most of our face, doing the entire face in the texture makes more sense than having like part of the face be, a mesh, versus all of it sort of be as if it were like drawn on to the buckle or the coin. And then, rounding this edge, and then in general, like when you have the arms out like this, the thumbs forward is one of the ways. Although, like the hands here probably will end up being kind of, together, not having articulating individual fingers, except if absolutely necessary, is, much easier to handle there. I mean, there's a lot of complication in the hand, but that's good. And you got the bent knees. That's good. And so this will be a good one. We can see in the remesh process, that's where we could build in some of the rounding there for this. And so you sent me, buggle. I thought you said buckle, like belt buckle.
No, it's
Buggle? Like a bug? Okay, let's vote. Buggle. Buckle. No one likes buckle? Like belt buckle?
But I think Buggle works with the antenna better.
Yeah, it's more buggy with the eyes too.
Okay. All right. Well, the people have spoken. Buggle.
Hi, it's Crimson, and this is my 3D character model for our game. So for the reference sheet, what I did is that I actually found really useful is having it flat like this facing the front for when I was using the front view. And then also I had it again on the side for when I was using the side view. So that way when I locked in, that I could actually compare the measurements straight up, and it actually helped keep my proportions pretty good on both angles, and it made it really convenient to swap between the two. So this is my model. Let me turn off the pictures real quick. So yeah, he, I think, turned out pretty good. The hardest part was definitely modeling this hat. It looks kind of weird, but I kind of like it. One thing that I struggled with, let me turn one of these back on, that I don't really know how I'm going to do is the crab claw. So what I've done to just block it in is I just have two boxes that if I turn off this again, you can see that the inside is hollow. to try to emulate like a claw hand, but I'm not really sure how to give it, the little grippy bits. So there's that. For the hook, I just used a Bezier curve and then just converted it to a mesh and attached it to the hook. But I think the proportions look good. I was making sure that when I was messing with his stuff, that when I moved his arm down, that his arm stayed like proportional. Because when I originally made it, his arms would, like, when I put them down instead of being out, they would like reach past his kneecaps, which looks weird. So yeah, and then while I was doing it, I was also checking the UVs and stuff to make sure that it made sense and wasn't completely crazy. So overall, yeah, I think I did a good job translating my art into the model so far, and I'm excited to start painting it and rigging it. Thank you.
Cool.
Hi, it's Crimson, and
We'll look at the hat there. Some ideas here with the claw. There'd be some different ways to do this, but off the top of my head, let's look. So I've got a cube, and then I'll delete this bottom face, and then I'll subdivide it, and move this one this way, and maybe 2. There we go. And then we can apply that. And so we need we have the general shape here, but we need some more points here to move around to make the parts over here. So tab, and we can alt click here to select the whole way around, and fill fills it in, but we get a giant n-gon here, meaning way more than 4 sides. And so when we start doing what the next part is going to be, which is, perhaps moving some of these points to start to create that irregular part of the claw, you can see, like, this is the non-planar problem amplified quite a bit, right? This is part of the bad part of n-gons. So starting in 4.5, I believe, there's fill, and then there's also face grid fill. And let's see here, I think that should work, right? And so that automatically tries to subdivide the fill, but the offset here, there we go. That's probably what we want. So that goes how we would want it there. Now, this, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so it's 16. It's 8 on both sides. And so grid fill works perfect. As long as we have an even number going around, you can make quads out of that all day long. If you have an odd number going around, the grid fill may not work at all, because then it's not, like, we can't do it without having triangles. Then there's the whole, like, well, where do we put the triangles and all that sort of business. And so that gives us what we want there. And so now, we could just sort of move some of these points around. I would, first do this with just, the points tool. And so grabbing some of these to move up and start to figure out how to do this. If you need more subdivisions here, K for the knife tool allows you to cut across, and then enter to get that. And so you would have some other points that you could use. And then to get the shape more how I would want, I might go over to sculpting mode with just the grab tool. F, to be able to push some of the points around to kind of get the shape how I would want it. Maybe turn up the strength a little bit so that this tool works a little bit stronger. And then come back over to here. So shade smooth is going to kind of obliterate that sharp edge, which you could restore again by selecting this loop, alt clicking. Again, the advantage of having quads all around here. Make sure I'm in edge mode. And saying mark sharp. And so now even in shade smooth, we get that sharp edge there. And then I suppose the easiest, we would want to have two separate things here so that the claws could open and close. And so I suppose the next step would be to get the anchor point figured out so that it was where you would want. And then perhaps you could use the mirror. Well, the mirror is going to keep it in the same object. And so I would probably just, just copy and paste it. Get out of origin. There we go. And then scale that down a little bit, or however. And so there you've got something that's still going to be able to open and close, but kind of has that crab claw kind of look to it. Yeah, especially from this distance, that's probably plenty of geometry. So something like that gives us, something that does not need to be remeshed. The original modeling process gives us quads, right? And so this will be, as we do cleanup examples here, once we look at everybody's things, we'll be remeshing parts of it in order to achieve more quad-based topology. And so did your original modeling technique result in quads? If so, like most of Gavin's, then you're fine. We don't need to remesh said part, right? But if not, like if you had either, let's make it twofold actually, because like Jack's thing was mostly quads, but they were kind of, some of them were much larger than others, and it was just generally too low poly. So we'll do some remeshing there. But did it get quads, and are they sort of evenly spaced? Especially on a character that's going to be deforming, right? For an object that's just sitting there, like a prop, if you have some sort of flat face that's just one face, that's usually fine. As soon as this thing starts to squish or deform in any way, then having equally distributed topology is much more, is necessary in order to bend. Because one face, like one continuous face, will not bend, right? So for super simple things that just sit there, that's fine. But yeah, something like that for the crab claw there. But the design of it looks really good. The hat, yeah, I think the hat reads as pirate hat there. Yeah, okay, great. Here's Amy's.
Hello. So these are my concept sketches I did. We have the front view and then the side view. I made my creature look like a cat since I like cats and I thought it'd be easy to make. I didn't want it to officially be a cat because it's easy to get specific details of a cat wrong and I didn't want to make obvious mistakes. I chose this design because I really like characters that have cloaks since I thought it looks cool and I wanted to try making one. Another reason for adding the cloak design was because I like to think that it's cold underground, and since my game starts in an underground sewer, I made it seem as if my character was trying to keep themselves warm. Okay, so for my 3D model, I made this. It took a bit of time to make, but I really like how it turned out. So like side view, back view, under. So while making this, I was having trouble with the subdivision surface. I had to keep remodeling and moving parts around, and I was getting a bit annoyed. It wasn't until I actually fully watched the video that I realized I just had to turn the parts into meshes. That way it doesn't automatically change shapes. So yeah. Other than that, I had a little trouble.
Okay, that looks good. We'll load it up in here in Blender. I mean, it's tough. We didn't see the wireframe view, which, as we're learning, is super important here in this case. So let me make sure we grab that as well. Okay, everyone loves that design. It's really good, and that looked like you had at least the shape blocked out correctly. So we'll look at remeshing it there.
Hello, this is my assignment for the week. Here is Razor, the main character for my game. I changed the design to be more chibi so that there would be less to model and it would be theoretically easier to animate.
Is that left over from the pandemic or?
But primarily to simplify. I took the question of how is this different from Mad Max a little bit to heart. So I'm combining some like LED technology with the mask. This is supposed to be an LED mask, so that there's a little bit more technology involved in this world versus the Mad Max, which is just very diesel punk. So this is a kind of combination of like Mad Max and cyberpunk-esque, leaning a little bit more towards that wastelandy effect. So this is the small, this is the front profile, and then this is the side. And here I made two versions. This is the high poly. So I sculpted this first. I started with simple polygons for each body part, and then I sculpted them together. And then this is retopologized using a lot simpler. So then here is the polygons for it, for that low poly. So if we look in Blender, this is what it looks like. There is going to be a zipper here, as you saw in my design. There's going to be that little zipper thing, but that's going to be part of the texture. There's no reason for me to model that. And then taking the advice from class on Monday is instead of the having those be individual polygons, I'm just going to use the opacity when I paint it. So that's there, but I didn't know that for the pants yet. So that's why the pants are like that. So this is the little screen, replacing the face. The little ears, a lot more detailed here. And I'm going to bake that texture on to this super low poly ear. Yeah, this is my character. Nice little shoulder pad. I'm excited to paint. And I think that is a technical challenge. Blender kept on crashing a lot, and it took a long time to retopologize everything. Just a lot of accessories, which kind of sucked. Yep, so that is it. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, this looks great. I mean, where do we get to there? Yeah, especially because the head, like, because you have these funny proportions. Yeah, I mean, the ear could certainly be denser, and because like the silhouette of it is going to be pretty boxy regardless of what happens with the ear there. But you know, like, this is pretty minor detail, right? We're going to be looking at the blinky face light stuff probably, right? Or we'll be seeing that in the vehicle, right? That's still the plan, or that this is the character that's in a car.
They're the one that like gets out of the car.
Gets out of the car. Okay, yeah. Oh, but the car, I always envision it as like a Jeep with no roof. Is that what you're envisioning, or no? No, okay. Okay, all right, yeah. I don't know why, it's just what I was visualizing.
And we'll go over how to animate the textures.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get there. Because, yeah, about, it seems like most everybody animating the facial texture on is the way to go here. So, yeah, that's the only thing. You know, this strikes me as fine. I mean, depending on what you do with the tattered edge here, this may look a little bit different, but, you know, I think that works. And then that also, the only thing I thought of here was, you know, if you make this edge tattered, does this face extend in? So there's like a tiny bit of overlap there, so that when you use the alpha channel on this part, that there is something below it to see, right? Not like an entire body below the shirt, but just as the arm extend into the sleeve a little bit.
Yeah, the entire body is meshed separate from the clothes.
Okay, so there's like a whole body underneath the... Okay, all right. So yeah, you probably don't need the whole body. You just need the arm to extend a little bit in here.
Well, I wanted to make it so that I had a base model, so if I wanted to add NPCs, I could just use that same body and then just change the clothes or accessories.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, that solves that problem. But then in the UV unwrapping, you want to make sure that the shirt is separate from the other parts, right? That'll make that...
They're separate objects.
Yeah, separate, easier. And then this on the shirt is not double-sided. Like, it's just the front face, and then there's a little bit of a side face here. There's not... It doesn't have thickness, right?
Yeah.
Yes, meaning no. Okay, correct. Yes. Just one face on the shirt, right? Okay, yeah, that's what you want. Cool. That's a very cool design. Yeah, and I can see like sort of blinky face things. I've seen a lot of like cosplay mask kind of stuff like that. I mean, that's what you're saying? Like, that's the cyberpunk part? It's like the LEDs on the face mask?
The eyes could like change based off of...
Right. Yeah, I've seen that on Instagram or something. Okay, Madeline.
Hello, this is Madeline, and this is my overview of my character design and how my model is turning out so far. I have a little sunflower lady design so far, kind of in the side view and the front view. I definitely feel like I could have drawn that out a little better, maybe had her limbs a little straighter, like right here, to help me in Blender when I was making the shapes and stuff, but it worked out okay. I've got a model down so far. But yeah, I want to go for, as the character's kind of walking around in the world, a very cute and simple form, almost kind of like little small simplified version of it. And then when the characters are actually interacting with each other, I would like to do like a 2D version that is a lot more detailed. The flower's a bit more complex, and all the characters are like a little bit more like humanified rather than this kind of small cutesy form. I want to do a lot of like 2D, 3D, and kind of a mixed media in this kind of project because I really, really loved mixed media. Yeah, so that's kind of her so far. She doesn't really have a name. I definitely want to add a lot of elements with like texture and stuff. I think I might have her face done in texture because I think that might be kind of the best way to get a nice like facial animation, and I want to really focus just on the eyes being a very expressive part. I don't think I want the other characters to have a mouth, but I definitely don't want her to have a mouth to kind of show how she feels a little disconnected from the world and doesn't feel like she can connect or contribute to the other people in her town as much. She feels very like disconnected, so I definitely want to kind of emphasize that in kind of her looks and her expression and kind of make her kind of stand apart from some of the other characters that way. So I don't know, it might be beneficial to have them have a mouth, but yeah, that's it so far. This is my character design, so thank you so much.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, meshing together here and here, and then, I mean, you could paint on a lot of the clothing, I think, as long as you just modeled in the cuff there at the bottom. That would, I'll give you some more, again, it's the silhouette. We want to represent that silhouette there. And then, yeah, let's see how you did the petals there. You know, I really like the naturalistic look of the petals there, and these all look super the same. And see if there's an easy way. I mean, the random tool would definitely give us some movement there, depending on how much topology there is for the petals. But let's look at that. Cool. I think everybody agrees this is a cool design, and I'm anxious to see what the whole game looks like there for sure.
Hello, these are the concept sketches for Syra. I don't have front and side view sketches for her, but I have those types of angles for Sid, Cassette, and Jax, though. For Syra's design, mostly what her design was focused on was making her so simple that I knew that I had the skill to reliably recreate her. I wanted her design to be as simple as possible while still being interesting to look at. She honestly came first before the game, and basically that sort of influenced the rest of the game, especially the color scheme influenced like this sort of time period and aesthetic of the game, as well as just her outfit, just professional and futuristic. And she has a very intense stare, which gave me an indication of what her personality was going to be like. And that personality sort of influenced what the game was going to be about. I didn't encounter too many technical difficulties, mostly because I've used Blender a decent amount before. Most of the difficulties I had were with using the join command. I underestimated how difficult it would be to realign certain parts of the mesh. Like, I did it a bit inefficiently, and so a lot of the parts were separated, and so when I joined them together, for example, the arm was partially inside of the shoulder. I had to do a lot of work to make sure the mesh turned out to be one cohesive piece. I've also started on making the models for the rest of the characters, mostly focusing on repurposing Syra's mesh, and I'm going to add the rest of the details later. I do have a couple of questions. I am hoping with Jax's design, I would like to be able to have his shorts specifically, for those to sort of move in a way where as his leg moves upward, it moves independently of the shorts, and then it hits the short, and then the short is dragged along with it. I don't know if that's possible. Also, a lot of these designs would require only certain parts of the mesh to glow, like this green and Syra's blue. I'm wondering how I would be able to make that done with a material, or if they would just have to be separate materials. And I want the characters to move in a specific way so you can kind of see it here. I did some little drawings of them munching. I don't think it would look very good for their elbows to bend very humanistically. I kind of want it to be that there's like a little bit of a curve, and then the rest of the arm also curves along with that. So sort of like a semi rubber hose, I guess. I'm wondering if that's possible in the rig or if I'm going to have to animate that manually. And yeah, that's it. Hello, these are the concept sketches.
Okay, the glow thing is just a matter of a separate channel in Substance Painter. And so that can then give you an emission texture that goes directly there. Yeah, let's worry about her first here, and then the multiple NPCs and their shorts later. The glow thing is we'll remesh yours here and look at how to do that. But and then I mean adjusting the weighting on the elbow could probably give you some of that without having to go into some really, much more complicated situation there. But that strikes me as super minor. Like the stylization of everything is really coming through in the character design. And so like some very minor changes to the elbow shape, like that's really frosting on the cake here. So when we still haven't baked the cake. So let's keep our eyes on the prize there. But yeah, like this, having these inner parts glow, that'll be cool for sure. And that's totally not very difficult to just add the extra channel in Substance Painter there. Cool. I think we all agree those character designs like all look like they're of the same world, and the way you manage their proportions looks really cool.
Hello, this is Desmond. For my character concept, here the front view, and then the side view. Starting off, I am planning to change how I look. Like I reach the outfit for it, as for moving the ears and stuff, yeah, listen to the feedback from last week. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. The character doesn't feel like a security in a county museum, so I might change around to make it fit, right?
Okay, you definitely want to do that at this point then, if we want to make change, like, because it's a multi-step process, right? If you want to change the character design after we've painted and rigged the character, like that means you have to go back and redo those things. Like the process is not super flexible in that way, right? Like, which is why I'm spreading it out so that we check in multiple times so that we can be relatively committed to the design as we move forward in the process here.
Being I have some idea of these changing the event, and I had attempting how to get the character model correct. One thing I've been struggling is the arm, and then the neck area, like pretty much the upper body part, everything upper.
So you got a good block out here. I mean, the extruding every part versus having the parts, using individual primitives gives you a little bit more freedom in the block out here. And then when everything gets joined together, then you can have the mesh flow over top. And so, yeah, if you're extruding, there needs to be an inset before you bring the arms out. Otherwise, the arms get pretty swole there. So one of those two things needs to happen. Either use a 6-sided cylinder as the start of the arm piece, or inset and then extrude.
And with the hand as well. 'Cause I feel like the head just look like it's square, and then pretty much make it more, you know, rounder. Because I feel like it's more a square box human. It seemed like I got it, but other than that, it's just figuring out how I'm gonna tackle it. Also, I'm planning to change the reference to more a T-pose and stuff, so make it easier.
Yeah, exactly. The T-pose, much easier when we get to rigging the character so the arms don't get mushed into the side. Okay, that's coming along.
Hello. So, this is my character that I came up with. I don't have a 3D model of her yet. It's a work in progress. I'm working on it. But for now, this is the design that we have. And I did come up with a name. Her name is XR17. And what does that mean? I have no idea. Mostly, it's just a letter number, serial number thing.
Okay, so part of your job as the designer here is to have some sort of story to, maybe that just came to you in a flash of creativity, but then, work backwards into construct, like what world leads to this robot being named that, so that's going to help you fill in the pieces for designing the coherent world of the game.
That they usually give robots and stuff, tell them apart, like a factory or whatever. I wanted to go for this cutesy look of her, with the little bust and all that. I wanted to look kind of modern. That's why her limbs are they're not connected to her body. It's like anti-gravity kind of thing. So it's very futuristic, but I also wanted to give her something to tell her apart against other robots, the tie, the skirt, little antenna on her ears that I like to think.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I like the design, but we're at step 0.5 here. We need to bring it into Blender and start actually getting it into a 3D shape. So good start.
Hi, my name is Sanira, and this is my character model and character sheet for this week. So right here, I have my model sheet for my game protagonist, Harley, who is a rabbit mage, and I wanted to try and make that come across as a bit more clear in this character design because I didn't realize that it was a bit ambiguous in the original one, so I hope it's a bit more clear this time. I did emphasize, of course, their snout here.
I thought it was like a dog or something. Is that right? Like I don't remember what. Yeah, okay, yeah. No, I think it reads rabbit now. The nose, I think, helps in the ears, perhaps.
To look more like a rabbit snout, if that makes sense. And just overall, I wanted to keep their design pretty simple. I wanted this to feel like a low poly RPG game that you would see on early PlayStation or early Nintendo. My camera just froze there. Sorry. So pretty simple. I can't really explain why they don't have arms. It's just a stylistic choice that I thought would be cute, and it also kind of makes it look like they're wearing a robe, kind of like Hornet from Silksong. Was a bit of my inspiration with that character choice right there. And then I did add a bit more color to their design because I thought the colors in the original were nice, but I think it was missing something, so I added that yellow from their eyes to make it pop a bit more, and I did bring in more purples just to add more contrast.
Yeah, the lines there, great addition. That'll make it definitely easier to visually track this character in the scene.
And that's about it. Not too much different from my original concept, but yeah, again, I did want them to feel like a mage and feel like a rabbit, and overall feel like a pretty simple design protagonist. I do plan to have their face become more expressive, if that makes sense, later on in the game, so they won't have those little droopy eyes anymore. I do plan to give them a more confident face later on. So looking at the actual 3D model, here is Harley modeled out. So I did give them their snout using sculpting, which I might go in and smooth out a bit because I'm still iffy on if it like looks the best. I think it's pretty simple for now. And again, this is like a pretty simple 3D model. I didn't want to do anything too crazy so far. So like it's just pretty simple blocked out shapes right here. If we look at the X-ray, pretty simple right there. Yeah, I do plan to smooth out like the ears right here and kind of make them blend in more with the head, and then have like the I don't really know what that's called, like the brim and like the actual hat and this witch hat smooth out and like blend into each other a bit more. So I plan to go in and do that through sculpting, hopefully.
Does the other part of the hat have a name? Yeah, I'm not sure.
But yeah, pretty simple 3D model. Again, I didn't want to do anything too crazy. So that is Harley, and that's my character model. So yeah. Hi, my name is Sunira, and this is my...
This looks great. Yours, we definitely need to... It's going to need more topology here, right? Again, because this is all one face, the body would not be capable of bending, which we don't want. Which we want. We want to bend, right? So there's that. We'll remesh that. And Alec.
Okay, Alec here. This is the character model sheet for my game protagonist. Now his name is Lobo instead of Cairo. I changed it. So the different choices I made for his design were the clothes, which were designed to resemble those of a classic adventurer, which helps communicate his role as an explorer to the player. So other things are that he doesn't have mouth because he will not have any dialogue in the game. His eyes are drawn as simple dots to create a cartoonish style, which contrasts nicely with the mysterious ancient pyramid setting, and also keeping the cartoonish style. That's why I made the structure of his body and head very simple. He will also have a tail, as I think, because he's a wolf character, he needed one, but I might keep it fixed, or maybe just make it move to the sides, depending on, it will depend on how much time I have when animating him. So this was the first time I have created a model sheet for a 3D character, so I had to make some adjustments that were in my arena design. For example, let me show you here. I tilted his hat, so more of his face will be visible, and then also that cover part of the back of his head, which was originally just plain here. So this is how the model looked like from different angles. Overall, the only challenge I found is where with these spikes here, I don't like when I put like shade smooth, this area looks weird here and also here, but then when I mark the edges, I did this, and I don't like how the separation between these two pieces become very visible, even though like this is all like the same mesh. I just extruded these pipes, and I don't know if we're applying the material.
Yeah, so yeah, don't do that. In terms of marking those sharp, it does look like they're separate there. Yeah, this is a little bit of shading error. We don't really see the fastest solution here is that if we can add another loop closer to this will constrain this area that the shading compromise is being spread over, which will make that closer. And this view is with the gray, it's, this is the default to make the shading very obvious when you're modeling, right? And so a lot of smaller issues like this, we can definitely do some things to cover them up in the texture, right? In terms of how things go there. But yeah, definitely so he did a mark sharp on that edge, like we just did on the crab claw, right? In order to make the crab claw look sharp. But that was good there and bad here, right?
Those edges will be covered.
But the character design looks awesome. Like definitely has like, Sonic inspired vibes here. The tail, I would straighten out a little bit for, right, T pose for tails, the tail T, the double T pose. Just that, yeah, then you can curve the tail once it's rigged with the bones there, right? And so I would definitely make that change before we go
From
further.
that, I didn't face any other issues because I follows the tutorial on Canvas and then also watched additional YouTube tutorials. About the YouTube tutorial, I found that this low poly style, I really like it because it looks more cartoonish and remind me of old games. And I wanted to ask if I could use this art style to make my characters like this low poly. I don't mind modeling the character games since I actually enjoy the process. And I have probably already done the new model by the time you're watching this video. So that's all. I don't have any other questions. Thanks for watching.
Yep, great job, great job. Yeah, and so we kind of did that on Monday with Lily's character, right, where we went in and we were primarily concerned with just painting the color, right, knowing that it's going to have a different shading, a tune style shading color when we bring it into Unity. Okay, and last but not least, here's Adrian's.
Hello, my name is Adrian Aguila, and this is my first try on making my protagonist of the knight, which is a scout. His role is a scout, but he's also a knight. For me, I don't have any experience at all with modeling, so I tried following the video on the assignment, and I tried also putting with the stuff that I want to add to the knight. I also tried adding like a tunic, since a lot of like the knights at the times were using tunics or like other stuff like that on their gear besides their metal armor. But in my opinion, he kind of looks like a guy with a tutu. But yeah, this is my knight, and on demonstrating it, basically here it is. All the glory of my knight. Even though I'm thinking of remaking it, but in an easier way, because honestly, in my opinion, this kind of doesn't look good.
Okay, you're on the right track here, Adrian, for sure. The legs look great. I think you're definitely on the track there. So just like we saw everybody else run into this problem with Jack's and Desmond's arms here being extruded. It gives you just sort of odd proportions for the arms. And so combining primitives, they're going to be more of the correct shape, or the shape that you would want to start off with here would be the way to go. So let's look at Landon's first Buggle character. First of all, another tool in the toolbox for everybody. Okay, this tool I'll add right now, another Blender add-on for quad remeshing called QRemeshify. And this is freely available. This is a little bit different. I'll link directly to the zip that you want, but another GitHub nugget to be aware of here is that we've talked about downloading from here every time. In some cases, that's not going to work for the Blender add-ons. And so in cases where this is actually developed, somebody's working on it continuously, is that over here, there'll be official releases. And so this windows is what we would want there. And then that we should be able to bring in here. And let's look over here. Yeah, there it is. I'm going to save and just, well, no, we should be fine at that point. We'll look at it here in a second. So that one's freely available. That developer also has a link on Gumroad. If, you know, we're going to, I'll use that here a little bit. For quad remeshing, that's freely available. You can, if you like what's happening there, you can throw them a couple bucks on Gumroad. This is something that will probably be solved imminently in Blender. There's some remeshing stuff in Blender, but not, the quality of it matters here. The Cadillac or Bentley or what do you guys think is a fancy, expensive car at this point? Or does anyone even track that? Aston Martin? Okay.
2003 hatchback.
Yeah. Okay. What the? What's that? A Lamborghini, right? Like, would you really own a Lamborghini if you had enough money? No. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be. I've never driven one of those cars, but I think it would be fun to drive for like 10 minutes. But then the idea of driving something like that around town just seems like socially unsustainable. This is the Lamborghini of quad remeshing algorithms. So this developer wrote or was involved in the ZBrush quad remesh algorithm, and now there's different versions of it. And there is a trial version, and then there's also a $15 3-month license. And so I use this one at home because it's fantastic. But the other one here should provide us some good, should work well. And so for instance, what is Quad Remesher going to do? It's going to remesh stuff into quads. So for instance, if I were to do something like this and come in here and grab this and inset and extrude and then inset, and then extrude, and then there we go, tab out. And now look at this and come over here to Quad Remesher. Main things here. So this is not Quad Remesher, this is Q Remeshify. I missed the Q. I can't go back and type that. The save first. This developer's done a great job, but for whatever reason, it doesn't have a no, you can undo it. It's just that there's no progress bar while it's doing it. And so for quick things, it'll be quick. If you ask it to do a bigger thing, it'll look like it freezes because you're not getting a little progress bar down there. And just, you know, take a deep breath, wait for it, then it'll come up, okay? So save first before that, in case, you know, you throw something really big at it and then you can go step back to that time. Also, everybody, a public service announcement, autosave. Check your autosave settings and make sure that that's happening. The other things here is that we're going to, the main issue here is going to be density, right? We want to, many of you have been very good custodians of the quads. In fact, too stingy with your quads, okay? So stingy that it's not going to be something that actually deforms well when we rig it, okay? So your games are not going to, you know, you're not going to tank the frame rate of your game because there's too many quads in your character. Like usually we don't, that's not our limiting factor. It's going to be like later when we design the game, you come in and you're like, I put 500 lights in this week. And I'm like, that's not a great idea. And that's why your game is going to run at 5 FPS. Right? It's not the character that usually is our undoing here, right? Where you're like, I added 100 particle systems this week that all run constantly. And I'm like, that's also not great. So higher. And that's going to be our main thing that we need to decide here with this. So just as an example of what this does, let's look here. This is our main parameter. And let's run it once. And tab in, and you can see what happened there, right? Everything has been changed into quad topology, right? And in some cases here, that's the density where it was at the default. So I can Control Z back out of this. There we go. And so that was at 1. What's 2 look like? And then our main thing here is we do want it to respect these edges. And so I'm going to turn off smoothing and run it again. And tab in. And you can see this is like a more usable amount. And yeah, this quad remesher is, you know, really, really good. This one is like 95% there. You know, there'll be some things that maybe you have to clean up at some point, or, you know, mostly in our case, these things will be fine. They're just sort of like not a wonderful distribution across the top here. But in general, the fact that we're able to run the remesh algorithm programmatically and then be able to grab these, right? And so this, because it's all quads, this is something that then, when we put it into the subdivision surface, especially we have shade smooth on, we're able to really programmatically control the smoothness in a way that makes this very usable, okay? And so so this is the distance between quads. I think this is the wrong word, right? So the density going up means that we have more space in between these, right? So that's the tool. I turned off the smoothing. This angle would also be one of the major ones. Under the advanced, is there anything here? No, under the advanced, I don't think we need to be investigating that. This developer has done a good job of keeping things up here. And then also, we can tell the remeshing to be symmetrical, which is music to our ears, right? So if we wanted it symmetrical on the X in this case, let's look at this. Let's Control Z back again. There we go. Symmetrical on the X. Let's look at 3 and remesh. There we go. Tab back in. Not for me. Not for me. Right. Right. This is, you know, this is why I'm bullish on Blender in the future. Like, do all the major studios use Blender right now? No. But like the speed and increase rate of improvement, because everyone is contributing constantly to Blender improvements, is pretty staggering, right? And so that cleans this up. Now we have, like, you know, this is really good. I'm not sure you can do it better, right? And very manageable amount of topology, especially if you were to turn on our shade smooth here, and then, you know, you could programmatically change these things. Okay, so that's the Q remeshify. Okay, I'll put the zip on the assignment, but then also just be aware it will not work. This particular add-on, the way it's on GitHub, if you grab it from the place I told you to grab it from before, it'll get a Blender error. So you have to grab the release, okay? is the value proposition obvious here in what's going on? Yes. Okay, good. So with that in mind, let's look at somebody's shape who's pretty well worked out there, but would benefit from the remeshing. Okay, and so Danira's here in that she has blocked out the shape very well. So sorry, Alec, I didn't have this chat up there. Okay, I'll come back to that. And so like this, let's look at this here. So in this instance, what does everyone need to do? Answer the question, do I need to remesh different parts of this, right? No, right? You went through you did a lot of that by hand. Yours is fairly quad-based already. Gavin, some parts, right? Like your arm needs to be addressed, but the other parts are good. Danira here. The head, it's mostly quads here. That's fine, right? It has the polar thing at the top of the sphere, but it's okay. And so this needs to be sort of addressed on a piece-by-piece basis. Then we're going to need to, once you remesh it, it's going to allow for perhaps some more modeling detail, right? In the case of Danira, she wanted a little bit of bend in the hat, right? And the way she has the hat modeled right now, it will not bend because it's all one face at the top. And so some of you may want to come in and make a change here at that point. The other thing to keep in mind is that once we get to there, we are going to need to then make sure that we have it symmetrical. And so before, I used the mirror modifier on Monday to do a lot of symmetricization. And now we can use the mirror modifier or perhaps some of the remesh with symmetry on to sort of bypass the mirror modifier in some instances, right? Especially if we're remeshing, if we need to make one part of this symmetrical, the remesh with symmetrical checked on the correct axis will do that for us, right? Then we need to UV unwrap and bring into Substance Painter. Okay, so this is our, right, this is our goals, right? There's tons of sub-steps and buttons and checkboxes and techniques and deviations, but, you know, like, what am I doing? I'm trying to go through this series of things, tasks. Okay, so here, for instance, let's address this. And so Danira's is facing on the Y. We want it to be facing on the X, actually, just, if nothing else, for consistency. And Control A, apply rotation, and we'll work out the rest of this here. Okay. Cleanup. That's looking fine. This, we want to represent that angle, and so I'm going to go ahead and I'm not sure why that wasn't there, probably because I didn't restart or something. Okay, so here, depending on the scale of your character, let's say don't smooth there. A little dense, and we want it to be symmetrical on the X here. So let's go ahead and run that one more time. Maybe at 3. Okay, it's doing world X We want world Y then. We're repeating over there because the anchor point is off. So let's fix that. There we go. So now this density, similar to that density, that's what we want. Okay. These internal faces here, kind of unnecessary. So in this case, it's still a separate object. So I can slash in and just kind of get rid of this stuff up here. It's gonna, you know, it's not great for the UV map, but that's kind of minor. Having a little bit of overlap in things going inside of each other is fine, but like a ton of it is just not a good route. And there we go. Let's just get the hat together. That's the other thing that's not a reasonable amount of density. Let's see, is this 2 parts? Yes. And so I'll grab both of these and Control J. Mesh. Mesh. There we go. Now they're one. And so they could, again, is the anchor point good? It is. And so again, this could be run. The visualization of it is a little weird there that we don't see that, but that's pretty good. Maybe a bit pretty good. And it's symmetrical now, which is what we would want. And so now, for instance, let's get this worked out. We've achieved relatively good quad density over everything, right? Okay, good. Let's manage this character now. So in here, we need to get everything into one object, back to object mode. There we go. We don't need cameras ever. There we go. Get rid of this. Control J. Control J. There's something that's not. Those are all meshes. There we go. Good. Okay, and so now we can make sure the character is completely symmetrical. Why does this hat not get remeshed there? No, it's good. Just sort of like strange presentation. Let's make sure we're not getting anything weird there. Okay, and so now we can mirror this. And we want to mirror it on the Y and make sure we bisect on the Y. And there we go. And we are merging and convert to mesh. Cool. Okay, so this is our rabbit. I forget the name of the rabbit. Do you guys remember? Marley? Harley? Charlie? Okay. That's good. Now, this is that optional step. Like, there's some detail available that was not available before, right? And so if we went over to sculpting here, you could do something along the lines of, why are her workspaces so strange here? Is she coming from the newer version? We're just not seeing the other part. This is even... There we go. And so now I can, remember, grab tool is really our main thing here. And so if I were to bring this up, and I might be able to, do something with the hat. If I were to make this smaller, I can sort of crease the hat there a little bit. Maybe bend to make this a little bit less completely flat, the brim of the hat, right? So this, depending on how much detail you built in the other direction while you're doing the other part of the modeling, this may be necessary, and depending on how pronounced this rabbit snout is. The other one here, just the regular draw, which is here. F control, remember, pushes in. And so now the density is high enough that like there's a little bit of work that can be done here. And so, putting some other creases in this robe or whatever that the rabbit is wearing. And let's tab back over here. Okay, so back to object mode. Make sure that we are on shade smooth. Tab back out. Let's look at this over here. That off. This on. I'm just going to, as a safety thing here, tab in, grab all of this, right click and say merge vertices by distance to make sure we don't have any sort of on top of each other things. Usually that's so small. The default setting is so small that it's really, you shouldn't see much happen there or anything, right? But it should clean up if there's any double vertices anywhere. Okay, that's good. Let's move on from here. We need to unwrap this. And so let's just do one other check for normals. And so over here, we are going to go to face orientation. There we go. Good thing we ran that. The entire hat is inverted. And so here we can come in and select all of the linked ones by grabbing these and Control L. That grabs all of this part. And then right click and say, or not right click, it doesn't show up in the right click menu, to go to face, go to mesh, normals. Either recalculate outside should give you the right results all the time. And so that gives us everything we would want there. And we have this pretty evenly distributed mesh there. Great. Now, with this sort of quad layout of everything, this should be fairly good. Let's bring this to Substance Painter by using the Substance Painter automatic unwrap. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and save this incremental. Come over here, and once again, feel like some of my add-ons are disappearing, or just not grokking which ones are in which one. Let me just bring that in. Our export here. So we have Harley selected. Let's just make sure Harley's anchor point is correct as an object now. So we are in object mode over here. We want this to be down here, middle of the feet. And then we're gonna Alt-G to center that, right? And, oh yeah, over here, get this worked out. So everybody, we want this worked out. I mean, we can't adjust this later after painting, but ideally not. And then bring this out and Alt-G. There we go. Okay, good. That looks good. And let's export this file. Export FBX. Selected objects. So knowing that this is going to be ready for painting. Make sure you have selected objects selected here, and we can export that. Let's grab Painter. So what I just did here with Harley, this would be very similar to Amy, your workflow over there, because some of your big triangle shapes are just one face going around the entire cone, right? That's the default subdivisions for the cone. And so here we go. Your process will be very similar to what I just did. New, select. And yeah, we do want to unwrap here under options. Make sure it says recompute all. I think that's the default now, but again, I've changed things here. I'm not sure what the default is. It used to be the default was generate only missing data, which means that if there were any existing ReUVs, it would just keep them, even if they were terrible or unusable, right? In this case, we do want to recompute them because we did not manually unwrap it. So we can say, okay, and good. Great. We see individual islands over here. There's not one. If you see one big gray box kind of overlapping the other gray boxes, that's not good. That means there's some sort of issue there, okay? You don't proceed. Up here, we have one material. Also, what we want to have happen, yeah, I can't think of anybody's character that would require a different setup than that right now. And so there, we're good. And then once we come into Substance Painter, what's the first thing we want to do in Substance Painter? Bake the mesh maps. Texture sets. Bake mesh maps. And bake textures. Yes. If you're going to paint a face for this, right, this week we'll just get painted in Substance Painter is going to be our goal, right? We're not going to come out of Substance Painter. We'll talk about that on Monday. But paint the face on a separate folder or separate layer so that we can turn it on and off and or export it separately later.
So separate layer but not separate texture material.
Right. For right now, yeah. We can move it to a separate texture set if we want to later. And so we'll do that for now. Good. Okay. That got a little faceted there. maybe because I pushed those in a bit. Let's look at it's primarily from the baking. And so if we were to look here without the ambient occlusion, yeah. And so yeah, I think I was just sort of a little bit too fast sculpting there. Adding one level of subdivision on the head so that you can be a little more detailed there, in this case, I think would be totally fine because our other level of subdivisions across this are fine. And so now we're in here. And the way that she constructed her character with these separate meshes, it also makes her texturing process a little bit more straightforward in that applying our different parts with fill layers as our base before we start painting over top of things, adding a mask, and then using the mesh fill, which is going to be this one, allows you to easily pick out different parts and apply it to those parts because those are separate and distinct meshes, right? And then in her case, probably another fill layer that's underneath, that then this can be the beginning of the rest of the character there at that point. And then doing some things perhaps in a paint layer afterwards to paint some of the stripes or details that we have on the rest of the character. Okay, so that one is over there successfully. Let's look at Logan's because that's a bit different. Okay, so over here, let's delete that. Okay, so Logan used the primitive blockout strategy, right, where these are separate things. And so this, we do need to get it to one. The advantage here is that he was able to much more accurately represent his intended shape, which some people who following the extrusion workflow had more challenges with, right? It's a more nuanced situation of pushing more points around, right? Okay, but we need to get all of this mushed together. And then, yeah, we talked about, not having that nose. Good, okay, so now in order to remesh all of this together as one thing, I want to make sure that this shape stays pretty distinct. It's part of his character design, right? And so let's do parts and then go from there. And so we'll do leg here first, right? And so this leg, bend in the knee, very good. And so this, you've already joined this into one object. Do you remember doing that? Yeah. Okay, good. And so here, that's all joined together. And so if we were to run the remesh on this, let's see what it gives us as is. Okay, the wrong symmetry there. So it's really respecting the angles, and then this is too dense. So maybe before we run this, let's do a little bit more mushing. So you do want smoothing on in this case. No symmetry here, right? The symmetry is going to be duplicating the leg. We want this to be one piece. We do want this to come up into here, and so I'm going to move this up into the leg so that Alt and then the number?
Yeah. It should flip to the side you want to look at. There you go.
Okay, that's moved up now. And so here, we have smoothing on, density. Let's run it one more time. Okay, so with the hard edges, it really respects those as the default. And so let's look at this. So maybe an intermediate step here before we do this, or yeah. And so the built-in remeshing stuff, which will mush things together, but not quite, not with really great quad topology, is the, you guessed it, remesh modifier, right? Why aren't we just using this? Because the resulting topology is usually not that great. Okay, so here, the voxel size for this is sort of the, this is kind of what the density number should be actually be labeled there. Like as it gets bigger, you see it sort of blockifies these things, and as it gets smaller, we sort of represent that. If we were to tab in here and turn on shade smooth here, turn on smooth, yeah, let's go with the voxel one here. Okay, so we've got this. I'm going to go ahead and convert to mesh. Now if we look at it, it is all together, right, as we would want for this part, but we want to smooth this out. I'll do this by hand. F, hold down Shift, and just sort of smooth this out into more of the shape I would want here. Right, and so this is the advantage of blocking out with primitives in this way, in that now I have, you know, essentially, you know, I'm setting up the block of granite from which then I can chisel down my David, or Buggle, as the case may be. And I could also make some changes here to, where I'm just holding down Shift, because Shift gives me the smooth brush. You can also come down here and select the smooth brush if you want. But by remeshing with a, you know, that much density, it does give me what I would want there. If I were to look at just this part by itself, the other thing I might do here, actually I'm going to leave it as it is. The one, as you're running different remesh algorithms, some of them really don't like it when we have non-manifold objects, meaning that there's a hole in it, right? Non-manifold is whole. Manifold is no holes, right? The idea that, like, if you filled up the mesh with water, would the water leak out from anywhere? If the answer to that is yes, it is non-manifold, right? And so if I were to delete the top of this, like I was just thinking about doing, then it would become non-manifold. I'm not going to do that because we're going to run the other remesh algorithm, and I want that to not get into that. Okay, good. So we have a much better leg shape now, right? And so let's go ahead and get back over here and come back to object mode and select this and N and here, and now run this. Pretty good, especially when we would shade smooth this, right? Now we have a fairly nice quad topology. This might be a touch light, and so I might go down to 3 and run it again. And save before I do that, because I'm not a moron.
We weren't thinking that.
What?
We were not thinking that.
Most of my life as an adult now is just making the Marge Simpson sound when people tell me things. I read the news and it's My kid comes from the school, tells me what's happening there. Makes sense what I did there. See how that is great combination workflow of things? Yes. And so let's do the same over here. So yeah, I'm gonna fix this right now. So thumb kind of on the other direction. Let's come back to layout over here like this. Get and G R control. There we go. And yeah, overlap is easier to fix in the sculpting smooth than big gap, right? And so grabbing this tab, select, move this face. So we have that versus this big elbow gap there, like so. But Logan, great job. Landon, great job blocking this out. Control J. Now, voxel remesh, which is the remesh modifier. And you can, the other nice thing here is that this gives you a visual, you can see the results of it. And let's apply that. And then let's smooth this arm out. And yeah, just the smooth brush, just using shift here. Having a bigger smooth brush in terms of the size of the brush versus how zoomed in we are here. And we could even grab parts of this and flatten this hand out if we wanted. And then, for instance, with the draw brush, F down, Control, click, can give me a little bit more wrist definition here. Or, depending on how much Buggle has been hitting the gym, we've got inflate, deflate, right? And so how swole does Buggle need to get? You get the idea. Now, that's good. Let's remesh this part. Tab out, back to layout. Select this over here. And yeah, probably the same settings. Save, remesh. Right? Remember, when you run the remesh, it seems to automatically go back to shade flat, so that you can see the results of the remeshing, right? But when you shade smooth, especially at this distance, that's pretty good. Okay, great. And so now we want to put all of this together. Let's look at this part, right? So this, really good job representing the shape, right? But if we want to have any flexibility in Buggle's main circular body, there needs to be more subdivisions later, right? So we can sort of punt on that decision by making sure there's enough subdivisions, and then later we could just map all of them to one bone so that they would move together, or not, if we wanted them to be flexible. So having the same kind of quad density here would be the better decision at this point. And so with that, let's look at this. Our anchor point is in the middle, and so we would be symmetrical on the Y. And so if we give that a shot here, here, here. Yeah, so that small bevel has a hard time being represented at this density, but let's step back, and we do want that sharp angle, and so turn off smoothing here and run it again to see if that does a better job representing that. Nope. Give it some more juice. Let's put it down to 2 and run it one more time. Still not giving us what we want. Let's take a different strategy. I might try this. I'm gonna grab this front face here and delete it, and then grab this here, Alt click, and then use our grid fill. And probably align this with the symmetry of the character, like so, right? And so now I get quads here, having some subdivisions, Control R, scroll wheel, click, click, right? So this is manual retopo, but pretty easy because it's just a cylinder, right? And then it could do the same thing on the back to make sure that we have quads back here. Tab, select this top face, get rid of that, Alt click around to grab the loop here, and then face grid fill, and then again offset to get it lined up with the symmetry of the character. And so there I get my quad mesh by sort of laying everything out nicely. There we go. And let's look at this part. And so here I'm going to do the same thing. So this and this, Control J, there we go. And then let's go smoothing on, back to 3, and remesh that. No symmetry. There we go. Nice. So that could be a floppy antenna later or not, depending on what we want. And so transmit that. Great. All right, this is looking pretty good. Now, tab, I'm going to join everything. There we go. What happened there? Oh, it was just the shade smoothing? Nope, there's some modifier. I'm going to subdivide that once so it's about the same. We don't need this internal geometry there. That's just going to be a pain for UV and rigging. So let's see if I can select that face. There we go. Control L. Yeah. Delete all that stuff. There we go. Tab out. Now we should be able to join all this. Control J. There we go. And then we should be able to mirror this perfectly. And then apply this. Let's make sure, actually, before I do that, yeah, I manually bisected it. And so we're mirroring on the X. We are merging. That's good. So now, convert to mesh and get our anchor points in order. So here, there, there, and Control A, scale, Control A, rotation, Alt G, Alt G, there we go, Alt R, there we go, and great. And we can again export this, name it, selected objects here, and again, we've been doing pretty well with the Substance Painter unwrap. Let's see how we do here. Here. Zoe, do you have yours with you? You didn't send me the FBX, the blend.
I do not have it with me today, but I can send it.
Okay. Here's bubble. Here. Auto unwrap. Okay. Some problems. Okay. This is great. I mean, this is not great, but it's a good learning experience, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so this is back face culling. So we didn't check the normals before we exported it. And if we come over here and look at it, I think we're going to not like what we see. So this probably is responsible for a lot of what's going on there. So we can grab this, again, Control L gives me everything that's connected, right? So once you merge everything, Control L sort of allows you to go back and not merge it. Once you join things, Control L still lets you select the unconnected meshes. And so now we can mesh normals, recalculate. There we go. That's much better. And then tab back out. Okay, that was the only thing. And so let's export it one more time. And I think that probably messed up the UV unwrapping algorithm, which is why we got certainly what looked like substandard results there. But let's confirm that. And so you can also, instead of making a new project, doesn't really matter, you can also go to project configuration and sort of reload or tell it to open a different one. There we go. Auto unwrap. Yes, recompute. Okay. Okay. And boom. Why does it want to spew all of that stuff? That seems like a lot of stuff. The other thing here, let's check with everything. Tab A, right click, in point mode, merge vertices by distance, cleaning up any duplicates. That may have also been part of our problem there. And here, I'm going to say shade smooth, messes that up, but then tab and alt click, shift alt click, shift alt click, shift alt click, right click, mark sharp. You need to be in edge mode. Mark sharp. There we go. Now tab out. There we go. Shade smooth, better rounding, but still get the definition on the coin part of the face. Okay, one more time. File, export, px. Back here. We came, we saw, we buggled. Okay, so it's not the world's most optimal UV unwrapping, but it works. We don't have overlapping sections here. And now it makes sense, and a bunch of it is, so that merge vertices was the secret sauce here, in that there were probably a bunch of faces that were like right on top of each other. Even when I deleted half of it manually, that just through running the modifiers and stuff like that happens sometimes. So that's the first, mesh surgery is no joke, right? And a lot of times I really discourage starter people beginning to not try to perform mesh surgery, because it's just, like just a hole you're going to fall into. But merge vertices is the thing that will take care of a lot of the problems usually, because that's usually it. It's like there's something tiny that's on top of something else, and that causes all sorts of problems. You see how the problem's cascaded, right? You can't see it. Blender should do a better job of visualizing this, and maybe there is a thing to do it. I just haven't found it yet. The other programs sometimes do this, of when you have these faces that are like coplanar like this, or over top of each other, that's visually obvious, because it's always bad. You never really want that. And so here, it shows us that. So the other option here, right, this is okay. The downsides to this, without getting it, spending another 2 hours talking about UV unwrapping, is that we have a fairly large amount of space here that's not allocated to any of the mesh. So, that's not optimal, right? But not a deal breaker, right? This again will not be the thing that crashes your game frame rate. It's just, not the best. And so this is fine. The other option would be to unwrap here. And so if you went into the UV editing and came over here and selected all of our thing here, I would, right click and it selects the sharp edges here in edge mode. So you could go to select and say select sharp edges, right click and say mark seam. And we could then UV unwrap all of this here. So grabbing all of the faces, right click and say UV unwrap. And that really works well for the coin, but then we don't have seams on the other parts. So you could do the automatic stuff on the other parts. So that would look like this. You would grab one section of each of these because they're joined together, Control L, grab that too, Control L, right click, and then use Smart UV Project, which is going to ignore your seams, make new seams, and project those. But we're only doing it on the limbs and the antenna. There it goes. All right, and so now we have a overlapping UVs. This is not good. But we can solve that problem by just simply selecting everything, right? So we ran two processes, that select sharp for the body and then the automatic part for the more organic things, right? And so now, in order to get all of this into the same UV space, because we don't want these overlapping. If they're overlapping, that means you can't discriminately assign a specific pixel to that specific face, right? They'll share pixel space, which is not what we want. And so over here, UV pack islands will then pack it into the same space there. In this instance, it did a pretty good job in that it put stuff inside some of the holes, which doesn't always happen. And so that works, right? So this, I would say that this map is, moderately better than the one that Substance Painter gave us by default there, right? But the one that Substance Painter gave us would work, okay? And so now, when I would export this, export this, and then come over here, and then file, import, or new, select this one, open. Now, uncheck this box, right? Because I just did this work. And so turn that off, discard, boom, there we go. All right, so now I'm ready to bake the mesh maps. Did that get inverted somehow? It's a strange thing. I'm not going to go back and investigate that right now. But yeah, that's probably inverted donals or something peculiar there. Maybe with the UV space that got duplicated. But overall, pretty good. And now we know how to make big biceps on our characters, which is probably a very important thing. Yes?
Other than the answer being manual, how would you go about making it so that the islands are approximately the same size as on the model?
Run the other command first, the equalize island size. So I think I downloaded yours. Where is it? I went the wrong direction alphabetically. Madeline, you also didn't give me the blend file, which I'd love to do the petals. So just to give it quick UVs here, if we were to smart project this, which probably won't give us great results over the whole thing, but it does spread it out, right? And so what is this? That's this, right? Right? And so this is undesirable because, Alicia knows this, but just for everybody else, this is the tiny zipper, and it's getting, like way more pixels Yeah, this is all like the part of the zipper that you grab that probably has a name. I don't know. And the face, which is here, select Control L. Getting less, right? And the face is the one that we probably want to have more. So even if you're doing a more discrete, bespoke placing of seams, which you should, we have islands here. And so we want, the number one thing with UVs is that we don't want them to overlap so that we can actually paint each part by itself, right? The next most important thing most of the time is that you want it to be proportional. If it's big here, you want it to be big here, because that means it's going to get more pixel space, right? The one exception to that rule is with the face, where sometimes you want it to be even bigger here than it is here proportionally, so that you can get more detail on it. You can see this if you were to look at any sort of character UV map. That a lot of times, sometimes the character's face will have a separate, its own texture set. But like here, right, the face of this character is taking up, 2/5 of the UV space, when, like this character's head is not 2/5 of its actual, volume or surface space, surface area, right? Does that make sense there? Right, because we want more detail here, and we don't need as much detail on the pants or whatever, right? The head is much bigger in this case. So the command is, before you run pack islands, is average island scale, right? That's going to try and make it proportional. So if it's big here, it's big there. So we'll run that first. UV average island scale. Do I have this selected? No. Oh, I bet I know what's going on here with this. Is this a separate thing? Yes. Our zipper handle didn't have the scale applied, right? So once we do that, there we go. Now, is there anything else? Just a real quick. There we go. This one. Control A, apply scale. I'm just looking for stuff that's not 111, because this is another place where the apply scale bug will sting you once again. Right, in the way that the modifiers are applied and in the way that the UV proportionality is done. And so now, if we grab everything, and now I run this average island scale. Right, the small has been made small, the large has been made large in our biblical realignment of UV islands. And we can now pack this again. Ta-da! There we go. All right, and so now this part here, I imagine, is the face. You can tell this button up here links the selections between the windows, so that when if I turn this on, now if I select something here, it selects it over there. Okay, that's not on by default. So because if it's on, I think the automatic UV unwrap doesn't happen. Anyways, regardless. That answers your question, yes? Okay, yes. Good. So this is unwrapped and ready for painting. What was the other thing that we were talking about here, modeling-wise? You're going to have the alpha channel in Substance Painter, adding channels. So under texture sets, this is a texture set setting. And so here under channels, there's two that you might want to apply. Alicia is going to want to apply the alpha channel or add the alpha channel so that it becomes something that you can paint into. And then Zoe and perhaps others are going to want to add the emission channel so that you can make stuff glowy. So you can just hit plus to add said channel. So emissive is fairly straightforward. Yes. Opacity, when it gets exported from here, it's going to be opacity. When we hook it up in Unity or Blender, it's going to go into the alpha channel, and in Unity it would go into the alpha channel as well, depending on which shader you're using, right? So not everyone needs to do this step, okay? Now, now your painting becomes more complex in that you've got 2 more channels here that you can opt into, right? And so say, for instance, you wanted to paint some glowy stuff, you would turn on the emission. I want glowy red, and now I could paint glowy red stuff. It won't look very glowy here. The amount of glow is ultimately something that you set in the final render destination. You can have it look glowy by adding a post effect here that has no bearing on what it looks like later on. The important part is that you've put data that's going to go into the channel. No data, no glow, but here, if we want to see it, we can come over here to display settings, down to post effects, down to glare, glow, bloom. Very little agreement on what to call this. There we go. And now I could, there we go. This is the nice color. There we go. And now here, put this over top. There we go. And so this is the emissive channel, and then, to get a sense for it, I could, there we go. But, this is just for you, what to see while you're painting, okay? To know that that's happening in the channel there. It would be exported as a separate texture. Make sense? Okay. I think that combination of stuff covers why is this purple? Right. Purple, magenta, it reacts to the lighting, so it doesn't look magenta that it does when it doesn't find a texture in the other programs. But everyone now knows that that's a GPU error. And so here, we'd want to, first round this. And so, because you were very studious with the quads, the subdivision surface kind of does it in one go, especially with shade smooth on there. Probably some sort of like cuff and other part here for communicating boot, right? And so, or pants, Control R, move this up and scale out, and then Control R, click, and there we go, scale this in. There we go, now we have pant. And then here, Control R, right? This is easy peasy because Jack was so, Control R. And then usually with the bottom of the shoes, Control R, a loop in this direction to flatten it out. And then you could use the faces and then extrude along normals to create like a sole of the shoe, depending on how much of that you would do there. You get the idea. And then another Control R here to sort of flatten that out. Okay, so that gives you pants. You did the correct thing here, so that looks right. Yeah, this all looks pretty good. You know, again, depending on maybe giving the body a little more shape here if you were to move some of this. Okay, so this is good. Subdivided gives us more of a shape here, but we still are going to want to remesh this. And so let's go ahead and tab back out, right click, and convert to mesh. There we go. And now, I think this is happening because I didn't restart Blender, and so I need to keep dragging this add-on back into here. I didn't have this problem at home. There we go. There we go. And so here, we do want it to be symmetrical on the world X, and smoothing on, let's say 2, and save, and remesh. Yeah. And that gives us something that's very well distributed here. And so this is going to deform, and now it's fairly pliable. You have some points to clean up there. You had some sort of topology problem in your crotch. Hate it when that happens. Maybe. Censoring myself a lot right now. Yeah, so perhaps before doing the remesh, were there some issues here before? No, that looks pretty good. Yeah, just overlapping there. So in the mirror, you almost always want this on so that it cuts off the excess stuff, so it doesn't fold over and then fold over itself, right? And so now if we were to apply this, should solve our crotch problem. Let's see. And now, if I were to run this, there we go. Don't say I never helped you out. Yeah, it's not performing super great there on the hand. So I'd go back and just inspect that before I ran that part. But that gets you very close there, right? In that, because you're so fastidious with your quad working there. The other thing here is just even, shape. I would give this a little bit more of a typical panel for the face in the front, right? Just shaped a little bit more like a head there before you bring it in. But super easy to make these changes because we were there, and then once this does get, is this the remeshed version? What if we gave it a little more? I had the sharp detect on. I bet that was part of what the problem was. Yeah. Yeah, not trying to do something weird there on the thumb. And so, oh, the other thing that you would definitely want to do here is make this symmetrical on the X. And so one more time, because that's going to make the UV unwrapping piece of cake. So yeah, super happy with this add-on for remeshing. Can see, nice, yeah? Super nice results. So like even Bo, even in your case, we got the quad mesh out of Painter, right? But it, you know, it'd be worth like with the teeth. The workflow I would try would be out of Painter, increasing the number of polys so that the teeth are properly represented. Then in here, remesh again. I think this is going to do a better job of taking care of that. And so, yeah, and so now in terms of do our things, make sure that everything is merge vertices. And then in your case for UVs, and since you're in 185, yeah, in this case, the mark seams is, you know, you can use the seams for clothes as like a real good starting point guide here. How is that wrapping around like that? Is that actually, this is one issue. Let's see. Yeah, see, it kind of twists like that. I might just run it again to see if he can get it to do it so it doesn't twist like that. I'm not certain. Let's see what happens if we run the remesh again. I mean, if they stay, that's probably undesirable in that, you know, like they're just going to be crunched. Angle, smoothing. Let's say no smoothing. Quadrilaterals, not quadrilaterals, singulators, iterations. We have it, symmetrical. There we go. Now we have discrete edge loops that you can mark as a seam, and yeah, the other seam was obliterated. So yeah, I mean, a little bit of work there. Again, if you gave it a bit of a, you know, belt area, right, that would also help guide its subdivisions. So yeah, okay, a little bit extra time today, but we're close there. So Gavin, based on those examples, you don't need to do your whole thing. You just need to apply that to your arm. Okay. And then, Amy, your workflow is very close to what I did with De Niro's, right? Because you have a lot of those triangular shapes, right? And then, Adrian, your workflow would be very close to what I just did here with Jack, because you had the very blocky quad-based flow at this point, right? What's that? Okay. Well, then maybe, like, if you're going to remake it, I would try to model Landon's workflow, right? Where he had the individual cylinders, right? So that I think, especially without as much modeling experience, just taking the shapes and moving them around, I think is an easier lift, right? And then we did the remesh modifier, smooth, maybe a little sculpt, and then Q remeshify for the symmetricization of the remeshification. That's definitely how that should be said. Okay, awesome, everyone. Yeah. Alec, did you send me your blend file? If you haven't sent it to me, send me the blend file so I can look at that issue you're running into. It's got to be something with the triangles. The first thing I would try, Alec, is going back into Blender, running the merge vertices, then sending it back out and see if you get that same paint issue. It's something to do with UVs. Okay, awesome. All right, so we're going to be bringing these into Painter and painting them. I'll also link to, like, 2 weeks ago, Substance Painter lecture from 185, where I go into more detail there. In terms of the stylistic thing, how much surface texture do you want on yours, right? Focus on the color overall. And then as you're slowly making your decisions about what the texture is looking for, what the shading is looking like overall for the game, we can decide what other parts need to be addressed there. Okay? All right. And so, yeah, that'll be the other thing I'll put in the assignment. Have some references in terms of like the overall look of the shading of different game worlds or just different animated worlds so that we can sort of make a decision about what techniques you need to do shading wise to how we want to come out of Substance Painter there. What's going to make the most sense for your game. Sound good? These are cool characters. I think this is coming along really well. Awesome. And we are